Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani, and I'm back with another episode of Rudy's Common Sense. This episode is going to focus on something that I've been saying for quite some time, and I hope proving for quite some time. But I think by focusing on three discrete events, we can prove it beyond any doubt, and prove it at a very, very critical time in American history, when this is the last thing that should be happening. And what I'm talking about is our dishonest press and the fact that we no longer have a massive, large segment of our press corps that is looking out for the good of the United States. That is our fourth estate. That is our eyes and ears in the corridors of power. That's a very important protection for democracy. Because if we're a country in which we elect our leaders, our choices are only as good as the knowledge we have. So what I want to show you now, at a time where 13 Americans have been killed in Afghanistan, 100 or more Afghanis in that one incident, and many more have been killed in Afghanistan, and America has really been held in ridicule and disgrace throughout the world because of the actions of our feckless, ineffective, and mentally deficient president. Is that now obvious to everyone? I tried to alert everyone to take a look at my podcast number 65, which is with two doctors that over a year ago warned us that he was not prepared for the presidency, that he didn't have the mental capacity to understand well enough to be our president. That certainly came to light over the last 3 weeks. The decisions to take out the troops before the civilians. That's virtually an insane decision. That would be like me, and I'm thinking a lot right now of September 11 because it's coming up. It would be like me arriving at the site of the World Trade Center and saying, take out all the firefighters and leave the civilians there. And then let them come out. Let them figure their way to the stairs, like Biden wanted them to figure their way to the Kabul base. But the three things I'm going to illustrate to you are three things that will show you, if you have an open mind at all, that the press in this country, a large percentage of it, is really an offshoot, a part of, could virtually be an arm of the Democrat Party, and particularly the left-wing progressive socialist Democrat Party, because they fail to cover things that it would be incredible for any newspaper not to cover. So I'm going to pick only three. There are many more, but I'm going to pick these three that that will fit into the scenario that we now know so well, with Biden's closing down the Bagram Air Base in the middle of the night, not telling anyone, leaving behind billions of dollars in very, very lethal and very sophisticated war armaments that could easily be taken by the Taliban and used to kill us and the people, the Afghanis who helped us. Turning over a list of people to be killed. And then, of course, basically organizing it in such a way that very inconsistent instructions were given. It's hard to even keep track of them. First, for people to go to the airport, then for people not to go to the airport. Then that the Taliban would help you. And then, of course, every night there were pictures of the Taliban killing people and reports in the European newspapers of people being killed. The British sent their own troops to go right to the homes and extricate the people. The French did the same thing. Of course, we did not do that. We sent some troops behind, but we worked in partnership with the Taliban, which might on the face of it seem insane. Actually, it is insane. But let's focus on these three things, because I have a question about this. So, at the time this was going on, Did you know that on July 2nd, 2021, at 3 a.m. in the morning, in the darkened night, without warning to anyone, including the Afghan government, the Afghan army, we completely abandoned the Bagram Air Base and didn't tell anybody we were going to do it. It was at a time in which we knew that the Taliban was making great gains in taking over city after city in Afghanistan, and the likelihood that they would take over the main cities at this point was very, very high. But we gave up the air base. Now, immediately you would say, how are we going to take out our people, our civilians, the Afghans that we promised protection, others under our protection, and then eventually, ultimately, our military, if we didn't keep our own base and we relied instead on a commercial air base? I mean, it is very, very hard for me, having worked in one White House and familiar with two others, how someone didn't object to this, even if the president is demented and even if he is exceedingly dumb, both of which is true, and even if he has made every foreign policy decision wrong in the past, according to Secretary Gates. Isn't there not a single person in the White House that would say to him, Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President, you don't give up the air base until we get everybody out, because we got to get them out by air. It's a landlocked country. We can't send ships. I don't think we're doing it by car. This air base is under our control. The others is a commercial air base. I'm trying to think, extrapolating from when I've been in the White House and White House meetings, and I've seen presidents told, that isn't a good idea, Mr. President. I've been at meetings in which President Reagan was told that. Been at meetings in which President Trump is told that. And they do change their minds when they're faced with things that maybe they hadn't thought of or new facts that come along. There's something seriously wrong with that one decision. But even more seriously is, this has not been emphasized by our press, either then or now as it's come out. This is a major, massive development. He's not being required to explain it. It's not over the blasted throughout the headlines. Biden abandons air base in middle of night with no explanation. Isn't that what they would say if it was Trump? Biden leaves billions of dollars in lethal armament behind. Apache helicopters, Humvees, numerous rifles and other forms of armament, explosives, very, very sophisticated tracking equipment, biometric equipment, which, when combined with the list of Americans and Afghans that we provided to our partners, the Taliban became a very useful list, and they're going door to door and killing people, which a division of Haqqani has been doing now for 5 days. Not reported in our papers, reported in the European papers. I think it's called Al-Ipsa, the name of the group. It's a group within Haqqani, works very closely with the Taliban, as the Haqqani network has from time to time. And it looks like they are the experts in biometric use, and therefore they benefited from getting the multi-millions of dollars in our biometric equipment, and then the even much more valuable list, so they can go find not only Americans, but the people they really want, the Afghanis they would consider traitors, the Afghanis that helped the United States of America or Britain or France. This, of course, has outraged our allies. Britain, France, and Germany, that we would be so negligent, so naive, so stupid, or so corrupt as to give them a list of people to kill and very, very sophisticated equipment to find those people. We'll be back in a few minutes. Big tech monitors us, censors us, deplatforms us. Conservatives have been helpless to do anything about it until now. On Getter, you can talk with friends and family and express your political beliefs without fear of Silicon Valley liberals coming after you. Join Getter, the social media platform that supports free speech and opposes cancel culture. Getter is led by former Trump advisor Jason Miller, who saw what big tech did to President Trump and decided to fight back. Getter is the fastest growing social media platform in history, with over 1.6 million users and growing, including prominent conservatives like Mike Pompeo, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Steve Bannon. Join Getter. It's in the App Store, the Google Play Store, and at Getter.com. Longer posts, longer videos, sharper and clearer pictures, and unlike the Silicon Valley oligarchs, Getter will never sell your data. Send a message today, join Getter. It's time to cancel culture. Let's proceed. We actually left there, and we left the Taliban, probably the best equipped army in the region. Some of these things we don't sell to other countries. And at the time that we did it, despite all the lies by Biden, the internal documents proved that we had a very good sense that the Taliban was going to take over, because they were marching in from one city to another, and the cities were falling like dominoes. But nothing is made of this. Nothing is made of it at the time. Nothing is made of it now, because the press is not the press in any meaningful sense. It's a propaganda arm of the Biden Democrat administration. And like Pravda would hide this in the old days in the Soviet Union, like the Chinese press would hide it in communist China, this is being hidden because it makes Biden look extraordinarily negligent, possibly extraordinarily demented. And worse than that, it makes it look like there is no one around him that can advise him, which is strange because he often begins press conferences saying, "I've been instructed to call on Ms. O'Donnell," or "I've been ordered to stop now." Do you realize how sick that statement is? First of all, a normal person who was president, who was of sound mind, wouldn't even say that, right? Wouldn't say that you were ordered to do it. You have to be a senile old man to do that, like in a nursing home. But I want you to think about the press, because this is what it's about. I want you to think about how corrupt they are and how they don't give you a fair understanding of what's going on, and why it may very well be that you have a warped sense of what's going on. Wouldn't an honest member of the press, confronted with that statement, "I was instructed to call on Kelly O'Donnell," wouldn't your first question be, who instructed you? Well, you'd just be curious, right? Who instructs the President of the United States? "I've been ordered to end this press conference and not take any questions." Mr. President, who ordered you? Who bosses around the President of the United States? We voted for you. But there's obviously somebody on top of you. Who is that? Is it a delusion? Is it true? I think we are entitled to know who it is. But in any event, if they can go in and order him to not take questions, or they could order him to take questions only from A, B, C, and D. Can't they go in and tell him, Mr. President, giving up that air base, given what lies ahead, is reckless? Oh, one last thing, and maybe the most important of all, that shows that this man has no ability to think beyond today. Let's do this the Socratic method. I wish we were live, I really do. Who's the biggest threat long-term to the United States? What country? Oh, I heard everyone say China, right? The Air Force Base. The Air Force Base is 400 miles from China. You know how close that is? I mean, we have an Air Force Base 400 miles from the country that has vowed to be our adversary for the next 30 years. If you didn't have such an Air Force Base, you would go find it. If you had it and gave it up, you should be removed from office. This is a very small map that I have, but we'll put a bigger one on the screen. But you'll see another interesting fact about it, which makes it doubly suspicious. It's 400 miles from China, our long-term adversary, but it's also only 500 miles from Iran, which seems to specialize in killing Americans. Not far from Russia either. A fabulous strategic location, having nothing to do with Afghanistan. Remaining in that air base would be perfectly justifiable. Not having a war with Afghanistan. We're in Germany, we're in Italy, we're in Qatar. We're not at war with them. They just happen to be enormously important strategic locations. You couldn't have a more strategic location than this. This raises the question, why did no one object to this? And why are we doing such a big favor for China? I think this would be a good time to pause. I accomplished a lot in 2020, exposing the truth, establishing the relationship with you, working tirelessly for America. And I came to know the work and value of the people at American Hartford Gold. You see, you buy gold not only for what you know, but you buy gold for what you don't know. American Hartford Gold is the company you can trust when it comes to buying gold. They sell physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or inside of your IRA. In the precious metals industry, they are the highest rated firm in our country with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. Give them a call and tell them Rudy sent you. And be sure to ask them what I bought. And if you call them right now, they will give you up to $1,500 of free silver on your first order. Folks, these are uncertain times. The one thing you can count on to protect what you have worked so hard for is physical gold and silver. So don't wait. Call them now. Call 833-GOLD-777. That's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Again, that's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Thank you for coming back. Now that is a relevant question because I know the press thinks that Biden is the princeling who can commit any crimes he wants and it doesn't matter. And people will say, oh my goodness, he would never do this. But is it possible that Biden is compromised by China because of the multiple millions that China has given to his family, which we can document on the hard drive that they've done everything they can to cover up? Got a contract. He was going to get $30 million a year if he wasn't elected president. I've got other evidence that shows a $1 billion commitment by the Bank of China, which is owned by China, into a ridiculously stupid, corrupt private equity fund involving Hunter Biden, a drug addict. This stepson of John Kerry, who was the Secretary of State at the time, who was falling over backwards to make China happy. He was kissing their backside, basically. And the third one was the nephew of Whitey Bulger, probably the most prominent organized criminal of his day. Not a single exploration of that. Not a single question, what's Whitey Bulger doing there? Not a single question of Obama. How could you tolerate this? How can you tolerate your vice president trying to have tough negotiations with China to stop militarizing the islands, getting his ass kicked in those negotiations? And at the same time, he comes back with his son, who he took on Air Force Two with him, that you paid for. And 10 days later, his son gets a $1 billion commitment letter from China. So, simple. America loses, the Biden family wins. Obama? No inquiry. No, hey, Joe, you can't do that. Obama, ethical? Slime. Chicago slime. Delaware slime. Not worthy of president, vice president. They drag America down with their corruption and their greed. Just quick little side note, every time Biden became a point man by Obama, Biden failed, and the Biden family got millions. So the first one was in Iraq. He failed to negotiate a status of forces agreement, very, very similar to what he's just done in Afghanistan. Many people died as a result of that. I know a number of them. He failed completely to get the status of forces agreement, but his brother got a very large part, possibly 1/3 of a $1.5 billion housing contract. And his brother James knows nothing about housing. Told you about China, right? The $1 billion commitment letter after Joe blew the negotiations for the island. Of course, Ukraine, he was appointed to funnel the money into the Ukraine because Ukraine was broke, which made him the critical man to Ukraine. And he was supposed to work things out with Russia. Well, he failed to reduce the corruption in Ukraine. In fact, he added to it. And he did nothing for them with Russia. In fact, he wouldn't even give them guns with ammunition. But the family made somewhere between $8 and $15 million. Not bad. We got more of those, but I just wanted to give you an illustration. When you hear the word point man, every time, two things happen. U.S. loses what Joe is sent there to do, and the Biden family gets millions. Make a good racketeering case. Time to take a short break. Not long ago, Mike Lindell, the inventor of MyPillow, and his team fit me for my very own MyPillow. They also introduced me to their wide assortment of other incredible products, like their mattress topper, their sheets, towels, slippers, and more. Sleep is incredibly important to me, and I can assume for all of you. It's time you give MyPillow a try and see for yourself. Listeners have helped build MyPillow into the incredible company it is today, and Mike Lindell wants to give back to all of you. You can get great discounts on MyPillow products by going to mypillow.com right now and seeing each of the specially priced items, including those in the radio listener special square. You're going to see rotational offers up to 66% off on products like their pillows, mattress topper, Giza sheets, but also new products like their slippers, weighted blankets, robes, and waffle blankets. All MyPillow products come with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Enter promo code RUDY for these great specials. That's mypillow.com and use the promo code RUDY. Thank you for returning. Second, again not emphasized, on July 23, 2021, Joe Biden has a conversation with President Ghani of Afghanistan. Phone calls have become really important, right? Remember the phone call which they indicted President Trump with President Zelensky of Ukraine, that they said it was a quid pro quo. President Trump leaned on him. He insisted. And it turns out none of that was true. What that was true of was Biden's conversation with President Poroshenko. Okay, let's forget that. That's the past. And let's also remember that President Trump put the transcript out immediately. According to the brief press reports that are having a difficult time getting real attention in the New York Times and other American newspapers, the Bagram 400 miles from Red China, you don't see any headlines about that. Pretty darn extraordinary that he gave up a base 400 miles from Red China when he's into China for millions. But New York Times doesn't cover it. I mean, if I say New York Times, then you can figure I also mean the Washington Post, even more corrupt. All of the other, the Miami this and this one and that one and this one, NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC. 80% of the press don't think it's important that he gave away a air base 400 miles from Red China, nor do they want to ask the question, is the millions and millions that he got from China, which he hid and I brought out. You wouldn't know this, but for me or Peter Schweiker. Nothing in the papers about it. Nothing. No warning. No, American people don't need to know that. Well, similarly, on July 23, 2021, Biden talks to President Ghani. And remember how Biden has been saying to us for weeks that it was a surprise that the Taliban took over. It was a surprise that they were so powerful. He never anticipated that. Well, if you listen to the parts of the conversation we have with President Ghani, he's a liar. He's a liar. Because he talks to him about how difficult things are and how the Taliban is taking over city after city. But here's the part of the conversation that I don't see how he doesn't get impeached for this. Basically, he tells Ghani to lie if he has to. I'll read it to you. This is by phone, July 23. Here are excerpts from that call based on a transcript and recording reviewed by Reuters. Biden. Mr. President, Joe Biden. Ghani, of course, Mr. President. Such a pleasure to hear your voice. Biden, you know I'm a moment late, but I mean it sincerely. Hey, look, I want to make it clear that I'm not a military man any more than you are, but I have been meeting with our Pentagon folks and our national security people, as you have with ours and yours. And as you know, and I need not tell you, the perception around the world and in parts of Afghanistan, I believe, is that things aren't going well in terms of the fight against the Taliban. This is while Biden is telling us that the Taliban isn't going to be able to take over Afghanistan quickly. It's going to take months if it happens at all. He's saying to Ghani, I believe things aren't going well in terms of the fight against Taliban. Told the opposite to the American people. Look, I know Joe for 30 years, and I know he's a pathological liar. He cheated in law school, plagiarized as a senator. It's hard to find when he's told the truth. But I don't know. How can you get any worse than this? Here's the one sentence. And there's a need, whether it is true or not, that there is a need to project a different picture. Isn't he telling him to lie? I'll read it again. And there's a need, whether it is true or not. There is a need to project a different picture. This is about matters of life and death. handled honestly and correctly 13 American soldiers to be alive today. And this man, on July 23rd, 2021, this fraud, tells the president of another country to lie. Whether it is true or not. What is he talking about? Whether it's true or not. I don't know. Is this from his dementia? Or is it from his moral depravity? That includes having taken millions of dollars. Well, whatever it is, he shouldn't be president of the United States. How many more people are going to die? How many more people is he going to tell to lie? And there's a need, whether it is true or not, there is a need to project a different picture. Was that a headline in the New York Times today? Came out yesterday. They cover up for him. How or why would this man hang on, Ghani, when the president of the United States is telling him, things are so bad, you got to lie? Why would he hang on when the core of defense in Afghanistan, if you followed it, is air support? Yes, the Afghan army can fight. Yes, there are a lot of them, but it's always been with our air support. And he pulls out of Bagram Air Base without telling them, without telling the Brits, without telling the French, not tell anybody. He just pulls out. Like we don't have allies. I mean, that's like being a weasel. You sure don't want to be in a foxhole with this guy Biden, I'll tell you that. He tells him, you clearly have the best military. You have 300,000 well-armed forces versus 70,000 to 80,000. But he doesn't mention the fact that they've always operated with air support. And they're not going to have our air support, which means they're going to get mowed down. Then he goes on to say, this is looking like a losing proposition. That's on July 23rd. He was telling you just the opposite a couple of days later. Why? Huh? The easier thing for me to do, maybe I'll do it in the next podcast, is to have a really short podcast about the few times Joe Biden has told the truth. It might be like really an interesting proposition, if I can find some. This is looking like a losing proposition. Ghani goes on to say, we are facing a full-scale invasion composed of Taliban, full Pakistani planning and logistic support, and at least 10 to 15,000 international terrorists, predominantly Pakistanis, thrown into this. So that dimension needs to be taken account of. Yeah, he took account of it. He took the air base out, and he's about to take the troops out, by the way. If your assistance, particularly to our Air Force, be front-loaded, we have a very heavy reliance on air power, says Ghani. Well, that's not going to do any good. We took our Air Force out. And he does say, throws this in there, I can't exactly explain it completely, but I think I know what it means. He says to the President of the United States, your Air Force was extremely cautious in attacking them, meaning it didn't do much damage. Kind of like the way Clinton used to bomb after raids, he hit an empty field. Or like this guy Biden did after the soldiers were killed. He sent up a little drone and he dropped a bomb on 2 or 3 people that nobody ever heard of. What a pathetic excuse for a president. This whole transcript should be released like Trump did. And there should be articles of impeachment based on his basically telling a person to lie. They could also be based on treason, by the way. We were still at war, technically, right? We ended the war on what was it, August 31st? And we left behind a couple of $1 billion worth of arms that we surely had to know, based on this conversation with Ghani, that our enemy, the Taliban, were going to get their hands on. It's called Aid in Comforting the Enemy. It was done by the President of the United States. Maybe look at that two ways. That can happen when you put a very corrupt man in the White House, or it can happen if you put a very old man who's senile in the White House and surround him by people who are just garbage. But that's Bagram Air Force Base. The big winner, China. They used to have an American air base 400 miles away from them, which is really, really valuable against an enemy. And it's gone now. He could take it back. He could take it back in a minute. You think 2,500 to 3,000 American troops kept these savages under control? We go back there with 10,000 troops, take the base back, put our planes back. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to go run back into the stupid hills where they really live in and where they planned to come and kill us last time. Let me add one other that isn't here part of my list. My list is of the three things that haven't been covered and been covered up. His abandoning Bagram in the middle of the night, but not emphasizing the fact that he gave away a strategic advantage against Red China, which becomes very important for him because somebody needs to ask, what did China get for the 20 or 30 million they gave you and your family? China is not a charitable institution, nor is Ukraine, by the way, or the wife of the mayor of Moscow. These are all people who bribed him. And his son tells us he got 50% of it. That's all been hidden, like this has been hidden. So we have these two major things hidden. The lie with Ghani, hidden, not front page, not giving up a major strategic asset with China. Nobody made anything of that. Sort of connected to two, let's call it 2A. He gave the names of the Americans left behind and the Afghanis that wanted to come to America to the Taliban. Yes. He gave the names to them. I'm pausing to have you sink in. So I think about when I dealt with really bad people, like, let's say the mafia. This would be like I gave the names to the mafia of the people who cooperated against them and put them in jail for 100 years. Oh, but he did more than that when Bagram was. He also gave them very, very sophisticated biometric and identification equipment worth hundreds of millions of dollars that makes it very easy to identify these people and find them, just to make it easier to kill them. Here's an article in the Post, which is about the only one that would print this. This was not in the paper of record that prints, the news that's fit to print. The phony, American-hating, Chinese-loving New York Times. This was printed on August 27th. Happened earlier. Only the Post. Following the Taliban takeover of Kabul, U.S. officials there gave the Islamic extremist groups the names of American citizens, green card holders, and Afghan allies. One U.S. defense official told Politico, which is a left-wing operation, basically, they just put all those Afghans on a kill list. There is no explanation for that. Nor does our sycophantic press ask him to explain it. Mr. President, what was the purpose of giving the Taliban the names of the Afghans who helped us? Wouldn't that surely get them killed? I know you think there's a new Taliban, but every report we see from honest newspapers says people are being slaughtered and killed, particularly people who cooperated against them. And don't you have to be on the cautious side? And even if you think they have gone through a massive transformation, that you don't give them names of people that they would have a real motive to kill. And by the way, this transformation had to have taken place in the last 48 hours, because until 48 hours ago, they were attacking cities, raping the women, killing them. Must have been like some angel came and sprinkled fairy dust on them. And here's another article. This was an article to the Zenger News, and it was reprinted in the Post, about the only place that prints articles about the truth. The Taliban has mobilized a special unit called Al-Isha to hunt down Afghans who helped U.S. and allied forces. It's using U.S. equipment and data to do it. Now, Azzuddin Haqqani, one of the brigade commanders, is using U.S.-made handheld scanners to tap into massive U.S.-built biometric database and identify any person who helped the NATO allies or work with Indian intelligence. The existence of Al-Isha has not been previously confirmed by the Taliban. Virtually everyone who worked with us was fingerprinted and scanned. They were all in the database. And they've already killed some people. No, nothing made of it in our newspapers because they lie and protect for Joe Biden. All of this is very, very disturbing from so many different points of view. The fact that he is lying to the American people, the fact that he's telling the president of Afghanistan to lie, the fact that he knew that the Taliban was winning and basically kicking the Afghan army all around the place, the fact that he left in the middle of the night a strategic base, strategic with regard to Afghanistan, but strategic with regard to China and Iran, relevant to NATO, by the way, and didn't tell anybody, including our allies. Didn't tell Afghans, didn't tell British, didn't tell French. The third one, though, probably illustrates better than any other the true corruption of the media. Because if this is not a newsworthy item, nothing is. And I've done everything I can to search and see if it was covered in the New York Times, and I can't find it. Now, I'm not the greatest researcher, but I went all through Google. I put in British Parliament contempt, New York Times. I went through like all those little numbers at the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can't find nothing by the New York Times. Here's what it is. On August 18th of 2021, the British Parliament, House of Lords and House of Commons, I believe sitting together, with Boris Johnson in attendance, held the American president in contempt. Now, you should know that the day after that, the American president appeared at a news conference and told the incredible lie that he hadn't been criticized by any foreign countries, and he had been praised by them. Now, this was one day after he was held in contempt, and it wasn't like just a mild contempt. I'm going to read to you some of the things they said. But it isn't just the British. For a week, foreign newspapers have been filled with Joe the Fool, Joe the Idiot, questioning his contacts with China, attacking his mental capacities, and attacking him for double-crossing his allies. Now, how could it, the New York Times has to make the deliberate decision not to cover this, right? Somebody tells them the British Parliament just held the President of the United States in contempt. First thing they do is, did that ever happen before? In the hundreds of years of history between the United States and Great Britain? No. You mean never? No, not even Trump, not held in contempt. Not even George Washington, not held in contempt. No. Here's the headline. I mean, just in case you think I'm making it up. There's the headline. What does it say? British Parliament held President Biden in contempt over Afghanistan. Oh my goodness, you see? And they're even talking about themselves. And our media hasn't said a word about it. Yeah, so Great Britain has pretty much been America's closest ally in the last 100 years of world history. Despite our salty breakup in 1776, this is from the Daily Telegraph, very big newspaper in London. That makes this an insanely unprecedented move. Yep. The Brits just censored Biden, holding him in contempt over the debacle that's unfolding in Afghanistan. You think this would be front page news, right? I mean, Trump would have had 5 days over coverage if he shook the British Prime Minister's hand the wrong way, let alone being held in contempt by their legislature. Nope. All's quiet on the American news front. The Telegraph understands how corrupt our media is, right? Wow. Where's ABC, CBS, and NBC? Where's the New York Times? Washington Post, LA Times, and others? They're what we call in the tank. They're like Pravda was to the Soviet Union. I'm editorializing. Let me go back to the Telegraph article. This is a huge, using a Trumpism, international story of American embarrassment. You'd think they want to cover this, especially since Joe said America is back after he got elected. And I was told that the grown-ups are now back in charge. Here's one member of parliament talking about the mess. Other member, there was then a break-in of a parliamentary member explaining how unexplainable and incompetent Biden's action was. Other liberal members of parliament, including Labor leader Sir Keir Starmer and Labor MPs Chris Bryant and Khalid Mahmood, denounced the president as well. This is the president saying, I was not criticized in any foreign press. The Biden government has just come in and without looking at what is happening on the ground, have taken a unilateral decision, throwing us and everybody else to the fire, Mahmood said. The Tory chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Tom Tugendhat, spent some time fighting alongside those soldiers in Afghanistan, so he didn't mince words when addressing the president's shameful comments that they were shameful. American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves. Now remember, this is after he pulled out the Air Force base, and their basis of fighting had been, for years, air support from the U.S. So in the middle of the night, he runs away, leaves behind all the equipment. The Taliban grabs it right away, not the Afghan army. He had to know that because in the conversation with the president, they were explaining how bad things were going. So Mr. Tugendhat says this: to see their commander-in-chief, meaning Biden, call into question the courage of men I fought with, to claim that they ran is shameful. Pretty strong words about a president of the United States in a foreign parliament, isn't it? Even more unusual that it wasn't covered by an American newspaper. Tell me they're not in the tank for him. Tell me they're not a bunch of corrupt Democrats. Mr. Tugendhat goes on, a man who's seen action. Those who have never fought for the colors they fly should be careful about criticizing those who have. Members of the parliament referred to Biden's action as catastrophe, nightmare. just in case you would like to see that it was beyond just Great Britain, I think they included this in the record. Czech President Milo Zeman said, by withdrawing from Afghanistan, the Americans have lost their status of global leader. And they get it. This is the CNS newsreader. The media are hard at work weaving a web of confusion, misinformation, and conspiracy. Great Britain and France are conducting their own military operations because they can't count on the United States. Within hours of touching down in Kabul, the British troops on their own retrieved some 200 British nationals. Prompting their doing it were reports of Kabul hunting down former Afghan government officials, obviously assisted by the list that we gave them, along with Britain stuck behind a web of Taliban checkpoints, lining the route to the airport and stopping them from getting there. I mean, this is filled with the speeches made by members of the parliament, Labor and Conservative, basically explaining that the American president has double-crossed Great Britain and France, double-crossed his own people, and double-crossed the Afghans who helped us. And he was held in contempt. They point out that the Taliban have been beating people in the streets and blocking access to the Kabul airport, contrary to their promises to the U.S. government. You know, when Milley and the Secretary of Defense get up and say, we're partnering with them because they're cooperating, and Biden says they haven't really broken their promise. According to the British press, they have been beating people, including Americans, in the street and blocking access. Here's a text from another British, I don't know if this is a reporter or must be a reporter. We have been sent text photos of Taliban checkpoints obstructing movement to the airport. They are not complying. We've had Americans get beaten throughout the night. One of them, an American woman, was beaten twice, even though they knew she had an American passport. This is all contrary to the statements of our Secretary of Defense and our President that the Taliban did not stand in the way of Americans getting there. According to a foreign policy national security reporter, Tom Rogan, the United States general has tried to pressure a British counterpart to stop conducting rescue operations outside of the airport because it's making the Biden regime look bad. Here's the quote. Major General Christopher Donahue has told his British Army counterpart, a high-ranking field-grade officer of the British Army's 22nd Special Air Regiment, that British operations were embarrassing the United States military in the absence of similar U.S. military operations. I understand that the British officer firmly rejected the request because he's a patriot, because he loves his country and he loves his people, and he's not going to kiss you know what. I don't know if this is true. This requires a court-martial to find out. If Major General Christopher Donahue actually told the British to lay off because they were making feckless Biden look bad. I know they've done a lot to make the military woke, to make the military concentrate on the biggest threat to America, white supremacists. I know they've done a lot of crazy things to our military, but I can't believe that an American general And how is it that the American press doesn't cover this? How is it that most of the American people do not know that their president was censored by the British Parliament. Here's a picture of that day. Boris Johnson himself got censored. There's a picture of that day. You could have this for the front page of the Times if you want. I'm only a few blocks away. I could send it to them. Gee, they can put a headline. We forgot to report that the President of the United States was censured for his gross negligence and for his putting the lives of Americans, Brits, and French in jeopardy. Oh, and we kind of missed this headline because it wasn't big enough. Taliban takeover. UK Parliament condemns President Biden, PM Joe. We kind of missed it. See, it isn't big. It's not a big enough headline. It's not a big enough headline. We missed it. It's an intelligence failure, neglect of moral duties, all corners of the government, Conservative Party, Labour, Liberal Democrat, and Scottish National Party members. They point out that the Americans are allowing them to continue their executions outside Kabul, and their narcotics trade has gone on uninterrupted. A member of the Labour Party described it as careless and staggering complacency. The withdrawal was a U.S. and NATO withdrawal, and he never notified NATO. It could be tough the next time we ask for their help, isn't it? And think of all the criticism of Trump when he was requiring NATO to put in their fair share. Doesn't that pale in comparison to this? Members of the parliament described Biden's action as catastrophic and shameful, cowardly. This is reported in CSN. MPs and peers from across the political spectrum, including Boris Johnson, put some of the blame for the Taliban's takeover and the chaos that followed on British closest allies. Mr. Biden was accused of throwing us and everybody else to the fire by pulling out American troops and was called dishonorable for criticizing Afghan forces for not having the will to fight when he is the one that double-crossed them. The West, says the Prime Minister, the West could not continue this U.S.-led mission, a mission conceived and executed in support and defense of America, without American logistics, without American U.S. air power, without American might. How about without even consultation? Well, we don't want to beat a dead horse, do we? If it is not apparent to you that we do not have a free press, then there's nothing else I can say or do that will convince you of that. But if you are convinced that we don't have a free press, then I ask you to join with me in the Freedom Party. I want you to go to my website and say that you want to join with me in noting every time we can how this press has become a captive of the corrupt government in Washington. I think I have illustrated 3 massive points that point out without any doubt that they cover up for Biden. These are acts against the United States of America. Not to tell people and explain to people that Bagram is 400 miles from China and we gave up a critical resource with a president who's compromised. Not to explain the clear request of the President of the United States to the President of Afghanistan to lie for him, to cover up for him. Clearly says whether it's the truth or not. And then finally, to completely suppress the extraordinary action of contempt. It's such a sad, sad day. This is a country, and the first 2 guarantees were given in our Constitution of freedom of religion and free speech, freedom of the press. We need a major change, don't we? So please, let's all stick together. Stay with me on rudyscommonsense.com. We'll give you a lot of other information about how we can stay on top of this and make sure in 2022 and 2024, our government is in the hands of honest people who love America. Number one. America doesn't even figure in any of this. America needs, when they say no America first, they don't even mean second, third, fourth, fifth. Nobody considers America. All these people consider is their own greed for money and power. It's a long time to 2022 and 2024. And then again, it's not. So we're going to be here to remind you, to explain to you your freedoms that are taken away from you. And I want you to communicate with me on rudyscommonsense.com when you have incidents like this so that we can get on top of them. I thank you very much for your time, and we'll be back with you next week with, I am unfortunately sure, more violations of our rights and more trampling of our Constitution, more of our express train to socialism, and more of the destruction of the reputation, dignity, and honor of our great country. Thank you, and don't lose hope. America has been through very difficult times. If patriots and people who love America and aren't afraid to say they're patriots, aren't afraid to say they love America, aren't afraid to say they love the flag, if we can stick together, we can take this country back. God bless you. God bless America. And don't forget, every morning when you wake up, thank God that you're in America. Thank you.